Darren, what's up? Welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, stoked to talk. This is a busy season for you.
Yeah, very busy. In fact, this year we usually November, right, is the thing for my line of work, and I think that holds true for pretty much anyone. But this year, I guess over the past several years, we started trying to push people to do work earlier, so we could do more, right, throughout the week.
Yeah, right.
And and then the Great Christmas Light Fight, that TV show, I don't know if you've heard of that,
Yes,
right?
that's
Yeah.
right.
So
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
when it came on the air a few years ago, we had a few clients who were on that show, and so now they're doing installs in August and July for Christmas, and it just
Wow.
stayed that way. So now it's sort of like August through January is all Christmas all the time, and so this year actually October is the busiest month for us. And usually it's
Wow.
November, so it's weird. Anyway, it's been a strange transition, but pretty interesting.
Jeez, man. Wow. So they're starting in August. Are you guys just starting to, you know, build them out at that time, build out the displays, or are they actually showing this stuff this early?
It's usually build out, and then like some of the installations or the projects that we work on actually take that amount of time to like
Right.
from July or August until November to get them all installed. And
Dude.
that's usually the case. So, but they're also usually people or companies who are actually opening their events earlier than most, so they'll open early November. So about a month earlier than a lot of people traditionally do.
Right.
So then the first, we spend about 6 months of the year just planning these things, and then 6 months putting them in. So
Yeah. Dude. Okay, yeah. So let's dive into that because I mean, we've all seen these like crazy, synchronized light shows and everything, and it's awesome. But I've always been super interested in how these things even happen, like what the behind the scenes work is. So let's dive into that. So, I mean, let's start with when someone asks you kind of what you do, what's your answer for them? Like how do you explain what your profession is, I guess?
yeah, that's a fun one. So everyone in this business, that's like, we always joke around about that question because
Yeah.
there's no right answer, and no one
Right.
understands. No one understands when we say anything that comes out of our mouths. So I've said that, like we used to say, well, Christmas lighting, and then you get this, oh, you hang lights on houses. I need my house lit up, and they're like, man, no, not that,
You're like, you don't
and
understand.
not that, and or they'll say, oh, well, how much would you charge to do my house? And I would say, well, we have a minimum of $15,000. So how does it work for you? Or then I just stopped saying Christmas lighting, and so I was like, okay, I'm going to call myself a lighting designer. And then,
Okay.
but people I know who are in the production lighting world, doing lighting design for concerts and architectural lighting and things like that, then they started making fun of me because they're like, "You're not a lighting designer. You're a Christmas light guy. Like, isn't that the same thing?" I sort of was like, "Well, I'm never going to win this one." So, yeah, it's a hard one to answer. People never understand exactly. Even our insurance companies don't understand what we do. They don't know what to do with this either. So it's pretty weird. That's for sure.
Right. It's a gray area, but
Yeah, I settled on blinkologist. That's kind of what I've settled on. Is I'm a
okay.
blinkologist. Yeah,
That's good. That's a term no one else has, I'm guessing.
maybe not. Should
You,
trademark
you,
that.
yeah, you can claim that one.
Mhm.
Okay, man. And then so I'm sure you get this question all the time, but like how did this all begin? How did you get into this stuff?
Yeah, I think if you go back to the early 2000s or so, um, there was just a few people doing these kind of light shows at their houses that were synchronized with music. And
Right.
the first time I saw one, I thought it was fake. I thought it was like, some sort of After Effects craziness or something with somebody uh, creating something
Right.
um, in the AI space. And turns out, it wasn't. So it drove me crazy that I couldn't figure out immediately how they did that
Yep.
until a light bulb went off one day in a Target store, and it suddenly hit me. I'm like, oh, I know how to do that. So I ran over to the extension cord aisle and bought all of them that they had, which was $800 worth of extension cords, I think, that day, and
Jesus.
ran home and built a controller to basically use this, call them relays, to control voltage to all these extension cords, and now all the lights are blinking and to the music.
Right.
And so over the course of a few years, all the neighbors I went to all the neighbors and said, "Hey, can I borrow your front yard? And can I borrow your front yard?" And I think we had 5 or 6 houses all in a row, kind of all done up and dancing around at one point. And somewhere in there, a home builder in Texas called one day and asked if we'd do one on some of their model homes. So I was like, I don't know, sure, I guess, So they're like, how much? And, I think we did it for $6,000 or something. It was very small. It's a very, very small thing. I called a guy I know who strung residential Christmas lighting, and we went and put it up in about 4 hours. And he went and cashed a check and brought me my half. And I said, "Well, we just made $1,000 an hour. I think I want in on this."
Right. Yeah.
My punchline is we've never made $1,000 an hour since then, but but that's where it started. And so I started, soliciting commercial business, and I went into it knowing I didn't want to do residential light shows, for with the business. I immediately wanted bigger projects, and so we started pushing to smaller businesses, and churches was a big one early on that we worked with. Still work with a lot of churches, and then over the years they've just gotten bigger and bigger. I used to be a corporate marketing guy back at that time when I started the business. And so Extreme Lightscapes came to life out of having been a marketing guy, a music theory and composition major, and lifelong musician, and a guy who loves Christmas. And one day you wake up and it's all mashed together in a pot. I love technology, I love music, and I love Christmas. So it all just kind of ended up in the same pot. Yeah. And year over year, the projects just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And we just did a project for NASA a couple weeks ago, and we did. Came back from the Joint Reserve Base down in New Orleans yesterday, in fact, where it was very cool because we got to do a big show for the service folks down there, which was pretty cool to be able to do. So
yeah,
it's come a long way since it started.
Dude, that's awesome, man. Yeah. That's like such a good, I love the like organic story of how that just sort of happened. And then you sort of had like this perfect storm of background experiences to bring this stuff all together, man. It's cool.
It worked out nicely.
Yeah. So, and then was this like, when did this stuff start kind of happening? Was it early 2000s and it just kind of started with people building little controllers and just having their, classic Christmas lights blink on and off and stuff like that?
Yeah, kind of. It actually, if you get there's some guys, in the world of synchronized Christmas lighting, which has changed a lot over the last 15 years. Pretty much everybody who's ever done it knows each other. That's maybe a little bit of an exaggeration now, but 10 years ago, absolutely every single person doing it knew each other. But some of the guys, they really did. They were doing synchronized light shows in I want to say as back as the early 90s, even, or maybe even late 80s. Where they were building the controllers themselves, and these engineers and programmers and making things happen. And usually on a smaller, absolutely on a smaller scale than what you see today. But still, those guys were, way out in the leading edge of what we're doing now. And I would say I know a few of those guys that are well into their retirement years now, let's just say. And it's interesting when I talk to them, and I'm talking to a guy who's been doing synchronized light shows since 1985 or something, when I was still in high school, or whatever. And because the real modern way of doing things didn't really come about until really the last few years. So, but there are guys who've been making it happen for 20 years almost, so it's kind of interesting to talk to those guys.
Yeah, that's gnarly. So what can you I have sort of a basic understanding of electronics and stuff, but so can you kind of walk me through like what that, in the 90s and stuff, like what their process kind of looked for building these things?
Yeah, it's actually, so the process of building is not really that much different to today. So the biggest piece of the background in this synchronized light show line of work that really you need to understand is that it all comes from the do-it-yourself community, the DIY community, all of it. Even the commercial products that exist now, they started there. Somebody built it in their garage, and they ended up as a commercial product. And so, some of the availability of production for, circuit boards and things like that has become more readily available and easily available to hobbyists, and anyone can design, if you have the skill set, to design a product and have it manufactured. It's not that hard anymore. Where 20 years ago, it was a little more difficult to make that sort of thing happen, unless you knew somebody, kind of thing. So I don't know a lot about how the guys did it in the old days, but I know they did it. And usually it's like they're buying parts and pieces from the hardware store. And my grandfather, he never built a light controller, but he used to go down to the landfill on the weekends and scrounge around through all the appliances and junk that people would, throw in the landfill. And he'd take all the light bulbs out of the refrigerators or the, bike wheels or whatever. He was a scavenger, and I feel like a lot of the guys in the early light show world were a little bit of that mentality where they were taking parts and pieces. And usually these guys were engineers, so that they knew how things worked. And so they had a knowledge, and it combined with their interests to be able to take just the parts and pieces that they knew would make lights turn on and off. And they just did it. I could have never done that. I still couldn't do it. I let other people do all of that,
Right.
And, so it's interesting that those guys were probably building, for example, in this world of light synchronization, we often refer to projects or props within a display as having X number of channels. Channels is the big thing, like a flip, like. You ever seen a flip book, where you draw like the rabbit running on 40 pages and then you flip it and it looks like the rabbit's running? It's sort of the same idea with AC lighting anyway. So back, even when I first started in this, my first light show was 16 channels. And I think 2 days ago, we installed just a Christmas tree that had something like 90,000 channels on it or something like that. It was just a Christmas tree. So it's like everything is way, 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 way crazier than it was, before.
Yeah.
And a lot of the key people who are doing the building of these controllers now are, engineers and hobbyists who they have a day job. They just enjoy doing these things on the side. In fact, there's a guy who builds pixel lighting controllers, designs and builds them, that almost everyone uses now. It's called the Falcon Pixel Controller, and we use it. Everybody uses his products, but it's just a guy. He's just one guy that just happens to sell the most popular product in this space, and he'll either keep growing and go commercial, or somebody will buy it from him and make it commercial because it's too popular to keep it in someone's garage.
Right. Oh man, that's so cool. I love how stuff like that happens. And then, so when you were first kind of starting your first show, did you have it synchronized to music?
I did. In fact, we didn't do very much decorating, but all before that, it kind of went from 0 to 100, just like poof, overnight. But it's really funny because the first year that I did a show at my house, I don't ever show anybody the videos of that anymore because it's absolutely embarrassing. It's a horrible installation. Like, it's very weird. Like, half the roof line's done and there's one window that's not lit up. It's a very bizarre, very poor installation, and one little controller on 16 channels. But at the time, very few people were doing that. So that video had, I think, over the course of 2 seasons, like 4 or 5 million views on YouTube. And we're talking about 2006, not now,
Yeah,
so
right.
2006, 4 million, 5 million views on YouTube was pretty high. And today that's peanuts. but then it was a lot. So
yeah, dude.
We were one of the early sort of viral guys, but because of that, it's still out there. And I always disown it. I'm like, I don't have anything to do with that one. I try to distract people. I'm like, no, look at this video of something we did last year. It's much better.
Right. Yeah, man. No, that's cool. That must have been pretty exciting though to see that take off on YouTube at that time. And I mean, you were just experimenting and learning and doing what you could at the time though.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
Also, my history as a marketer in those days is sort of, I'm certainly helped push the business into it's being born. And because we'd run into people every once in a while who come out to the house to see the light show, that they'd drive in from some distance, and they'd sit there and sort of look at it with a smirk on their face. And every once in a while, somebody would ask me, like, why were you on the news last night? Why is there a helicopter flying over your house right now? And why are there 300 cars in each direction playing chicken? This isn't that big. And I said, I know, but I raised my hand and told people that I had the best light show in Texas.
Yep.
And 90% of them believe it. So here they are. So I'm
Yeah.
a marketer. This is what I do.
Right.
So yeah, every year it became a process where we would write a press release, send it off to all the news outlets, and then they would all come out, and everybody would big to do, and all the neighbors, this big party in the street, and all that, and then over the years, I think during those days there might have been 6 or 7 people in North Texas doing that type of a thing at Christmas time, and now there's 6 or 7 in every neighborhood. It's there are a lot of people doing big shows and big displays now, so it's not quite the same anymore with all that press releasing and news guy interest anymore. Instead, we've moved on to do gigantic commercial projects, and that keeps our interest in there. So it's good.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That you do some crazy stuff. So can we talk about sort of what the build process is for a display, like as of now with the current technology and everything that kind of works up, like how you start with designing and building and programming or whatever you need to do?
Yeah, absolutely, because it's a love-hate relationship I have with that entire process. So yeah, you typically, at least for my company, for Extreme Lightscapes, like we don't market anything anymore because the phone just rings all the time. Nice. And I'm a weird breed of person that I don't want to have a huge organization. So just in the last probably 3 months, I probably turned down 30 or 40 projects just because I don't want to grow. I don't want to have that many people.
Right. That's great.
But my mind is being changed slowly. maybe next year. But part of it's because of the process. So I get asked. I'll swing back to your question in just a second. But a little preface to the process would be because it's so seasonal and focused on Christmas. Like we get asked all the time, like, why don't you do more Halloween? And we've done Halloween, but not as much, obviously, as Christmas. Or, why don't we do less seasonal work? Let's do nightclubs. Let's do music festivals. Let's do, other types of things, which I've also started doing, but through a different company. I started a company called Lumen Immersive Media, like about 2 years ago, to focus on that stuff. And but with the Christmas space, we're starting design and proposal work in December, usually, for the following year, sometimes earlier. Yeah. And it can be a process, but I mean, you have to keep in mind that the organizations that I'm working with are large and complex and filled with bureaucracy and, 8 million decision makers and too many chiefs and all of that stuff.
Right.
And so they're slow, all of them. They're really slow. And I don't like slow. I hate inefficiency. So working with almost all of my clients across the board is a little painful for me because I can't stand the inefficiency of multiple levels of management and meetings to talk about meetings and all of this other crazy stuff that goes on. But you have to suck it up and go through that process to get where you're going. So that takes up a huge chunk of the first part of the process is sort of figuring out what the client wants, because half the time they don't really know. They just see something on YouTube and they call you up and say, I want to do that. And then you have to educate them and, what can they achieve in their venue, whatever that venue may be, because every venue is different. So like we just did an install on a football field, that's different than an install inside a shopping center or inside a tunnel under a freeway overpass, which I also just did.
Oh, that's cool.
There's all, like, they're all different. Like so whenever during that process, inevitably that first step where we're just kind of trying to figure out what they're trying to achieve and how we can help them achieve it. They have to really be educated most times on, just because they saw something on YouTube doesn't mean it's going to work, in their venue. And so they'll say things often like, hey, here's a video I saw. How much is that going to cost me? And I'm like, well, it's not a valid question. So we have to go through the process. And once we've helped them define for themselves, what it is they're trying to achieve, then we start talking about the things that we could do to help them achieve it. And that's when we start doing budgets and start putting real proposals together. So that by then you're talking usually around March, April, May timeframe usually. And then it becomes about approvals, and it's all the business side of things, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times, especially people who do a first year show event, they don't understand that when I tell them I need to be starting on their programming or their project in May, they think, well, that's way early. Like, why? So they just ignore me often, And this happened last year. I won't name any names, but there was a project that it was sort of put off and approvals and this and that. And I actually finally kind of blew them off. I was like, I don't think this is going to happen. So I moved on. And
Right.
then about 2 months later, so this would have been probably August. And by the way, it's the largest project that we're doing this year. And they just out of nowhere, they sent the contract and wired the deposit. I hadn't talked to him in 2 months, and just one day it shows up, and it was like, oh no, now we have to do this project. And so I had to go scramble and find a whole other team to go help get that one done.
Yeah.
But so you go through that process, and once all the creative stuff is done, the designs are done, and everything's locked and loaded, the contracts are signed. Then we work on production schedules, which could mean almost anything. It depends on the event. If it's a light show event, which most of ours, I would say all of them include that component somewhere within the display, we have to talk about which songs are going to be used, and how the schedule is going to play out for the show itself, playback of the show. And there's always other elements to the venue. So a lot of times we're doing big commercial Christmas trees, so those things take a while to produce, and other props and elements, commercial decor, things like this. Everything is different, and it's really amazing that I don't think people, and they shouldn't. I was just the public, when they see the displays that we build, like, our goal is to just make them smile. That's the entire thing. Is you smile because our client had a vision and we helped them execute it, and now everybody's happy. That's the whole thing about it that we love. And I can talk more about that because that's important to me. But the things that we see when we're standing there and people are walking past something that we've built are very different than what the public sees. So, an example. Well, if you saw one of our spreadsheets with sort of the line items in a planning document, in terms of procurement, that here's all the things we need to purchase for this particular project. They're thousands of line items long usually, and include everything from 6-figure Christmas trees to 50-cent electrical tape. It's just massive list of product that has to go into these things. Or sometimes we build or have a challenge. So we had one project. This was fantastic. At the convention center in New Orleans a few years ago, we went through about a year and a half of planning to do this big light show on kind of a new facade that they just built on this convention center. And we were sitting down to go over the contracts and finalize the designs after easily 18 months probably of planning. And that was the first meeting that I can't remember his title, but the main guy, the guy that had to put a stamp of approval on it, was in the meeting. And he said, "This is great, but we cannot attach anything to the front of the building." And I was like, wait, we just spent 18 months designing an entire facade that is completely covered in lighting.
Yeah.
He said, "Yeah, you can't do that. You can't attach anything to the building." So I told him, I said, "Hold on." And this is what I love about what we do. If people don't ever think about these things, like, this is all stuff that happens behind the scenes. Because if I skip the middle part I'm about to tell you and go to the end is we did it anyway, but we didn't attach anything to the building. And I'll tell you how. But the public didn't know that. All the public saw was this big, huge, gigantic wall of dancing lights, and it was awesome. But in between the signing of that document and people being able to see the fruits of our labor, we had to figure out how not to attach them to the building. And so we had some guys come over there and look at the facade of the building. And long story short, there was a framework underneath the surface of the building that was sort of a skeleton. So we built a steel frame with standoffs that went all the way. It was a grid. We just built a big giant steel grid all over the building that attached to this sort of skeleton underneath the panels on the outside of the building. So, and then we strung the lights on that. And So when we saw that, when it was finished, it was beautiful. We loved it. But we would all sort of stand off to the side and look across the building because you could see that 1 inch gap between the building and the lights. And that's what we were the most proud of, was like, we actually pulled that off. The public had no idea. The public didn't care or have any idea, but that was our achievement. The achievement was something the public didn't see or care about. Those are the things that are fun when you do this for a living. Is you want to provide something that gives those smiles and creates traditions and does all those great things for families. But at the same time, like, I want to have a challenge behind it. Like anybody can slap some lights on a roof and call it a day, but not everybody can attach 10 million lights to the front of a building without attaching them to the front of the building. So it's
man, that's crazy. So was that guy's concern just that he didn't want to ruin their new facade on the building?
Yeah, they literally, it was, I don't remember the type of metal, but it was some kind of a metal facade, and he didn't want to get it scratched up or dinged up or drill any holes in it or anything like that. But it all worked out in the end, which was pretty cool. So I'm being really long-winded to finish this whole process. So we get through all that design, and then we schedule installation, and usually the building of things. We build a lot of things, display pieces. We actually have a metal shop here in Dallas, and so we build a lot of things here, and we work with partners all over the world. We work with a company based in Chicago that's a rep for a manufacturer in France that does a lot of stuff for us. And that all happens at the same time that we're doing the programming of any light show components. So usually through July, August timeframe. And then we just start scheduling installations, and some of them are huge. We do a zoo here in Dallas that we've been installing since July, and it actually goes live next week. So that took a long time, to do. And then once everything's installed, you end up in December, and you get some sleep finally. And I call it the eye of the storm. That's what I call December, because all of the work we've done is all installed and running. And it doesn't always go perfectly. Weather is a huge factor in what we do. In fact, we installed a project in New Orleans last week, and there was a tropical storm came through there last Friday. So that was awesome. I won't go into any more detail than that, but it was interesting. It created some challenges, but that's all shored up. And you get into December, and you basically kind of walk around when you're in this line of work on your tiptoes or on pins and needles, and just super stressed out all the time, because you just know that your phone's going to ring at any second, and something terrible will have happened somewhere that you're going to have to go take care of as fast as possible. And it's challenging for a company like mine, where we're based in Dallas, but we do projects all over the country and all over the world. So, whenever I do a project that requires a flight time to get there, I always try to get the client to have somebody sort of as a part of our installation crew, so that they at least understand the basics of how things work, so that we can do better troubleshooting on the phone with them. And I have some clients who they don't want to deal with that, so there's not often problems. I mean, realistically, there more often than not are temporary problems caused by weather. So something will get wet, but when it dries out, everything is fine, or that type of a thing. But these folks who spend all this time and money putting these displays together, having one night that a show is not running is not acceptable in their eyes. So there have been times, we have quite a few clients who they're completely hands off. We handle everything, including maintenance, which is a challenge in November. And but it's there's been plenty of times, I'd say at least 3 or 4 over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, when somebody calls and says they have a problem that they can't figure out, and they need it taken care of before the next show, which is the next evening. And I'm in Orlando, and they're in Denver, and it's like, okay, I'll be there in the morning. And so there are some seasons with more sleep than others.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. So what is is there a software side component to all this stuff?
There is, and a lot of this stuff has been changing actually over the years. So when we started doing light shows, we became a partner with a company called Lightorama. We were one of their first partners, and we're still a partner of theirs. But there has been a huge shift in the technology and the lighting that is being used for these shows just really over the last few years. And so in the Lightorama space, their technology in the beginning was primarily focused on controlling, we refer to them as AC lights. So they manufacture AC controllers, meaning controllers that will dim and fade and synchronize traditional 110 volt light strands and bulbs and things like that, traditional Christmas lighting.
Yeah.
So that's where all of this kind of came from. They were really probably the first, or one of the first, commercial providers of that type of equipment. So we became a partner, and we're using their product, still use their product for that type of a thing. And then somewhere here over the last several years, there's been a shift to RGB based lighting for everything on Earth.
Oh, yeah.
In Christmas displays. So I think it was probably 2 years ago. So I tend to take a philosophy with extreme lightscapes that I don't like to make a shift into a new technology when it's still new or unproven, or if I think it's just going to be a trend or a fad. And
right.
So I think I was wrong in this one, where I see people sort of transitioning to using RGB pixel based lighting in their Christmas displays, which have more of a like a pastel-y kind of hue to the colors, which is very different than like a traditional sort of Christmas light color. And they don't have the same form factor. So, a traditional Christmas mini light or a traditional C9 bulb you'd find on a roof, those shapes don't exist in the RGB world. So I always looked at it, I'm like, well, it looks like Easter and it doesn't look like Christmas lights, so this thing's not going to last very long. Well, right. I started saying that about 5 years ago. So I guess maybe I'm wrong on that one.
Yeah.
And there was another aspect to it, which was, as I mentioned, we were partners with Lightorama, which is, a commercial provider of UL rated, equipment, which is required for many commercial projects. And so in the RGB space, there wasn't any type, there is and still isn't like a real commercial provider of fully supported commercially equipment. There are people who are building and designing controller boards, which are fantastic boards, but they're not a UL rated commercial entity or a finished product. We still have to add power supply. We have to build the actual controller.
I see.
So you asked about software, and this is where it's coming from. So because of the shift in the types of lighting being used, there's also a shift in the type of hardware being used, which has created a shift in the type of software being used. Yeah. And so back in the Lightorama days, Lightorama also provides a software suite for controlling their controllers and creating light show sequences and scheduling them and playing shows back and things like that. So we used that for years and years and years and years. Really, for us, we didn't move to another open source tool called X-Lights, which is what we use now. For the most part, until I guess 2 years ago, we finally started transitioning everything to RGB and X-Lights. And Lightorama also has done that with their software. They've transitioned into versions of the software that support RGB and pixel-based displays, and they offer pixel-based products and things like that now. But the X-Lights product is an open source product, and it's extremely powerful. You basically can pretty much do anything that you want done with it. And so that's where we have gravitated to on the software side. The only challenge we ever see, and I always tell this to the guys, there's a team of people who volunteer to work on the development team of that open source product. And what we don't have in the I hate using open source products in a commercial environment. I absolutely despise it. And there's only one reason. It's because there's never the release cycles are erratic. Releases come out randomly, and they come out not very well vetted or tested.
Right.
Which, by the way, is cyclical, because when an open source product is not very well QA'd or tested, that means it's more likely to have an issue, which means there's going to have to be yet another random immediate release to fix, a bug. And so that's what happens with X-Lights. It's just this seemingly random, erratic chaos of releases. And we every year you have to pick a spot within the year and just say stop. This is the version we're using, and that's it. No matter what comes out from here.
Mm-hmm.
It's maddening. Where in the commercial space, like we also use a tool called Madrix, which is a commercial software package made by a company in Germany, and it's very expensive. It's definitely not open source.
Yeah.
They maybe have one release every year or two, but when they do a release, it's stable. There's never anything wrong with it. It's dead on. And I mean, this is commercial software. This is what we really should be using. But X-Lights is so powerful. Oh, jeez. I was talking to somebody the other day. I said, I need to get with those guys and just buy that thing. I need to buy the code, take it all out of the open source market, no forking, no nothing, repackage it, twice a year release cycles, true plug-in architecture, a better interface, and a commercially supported license line, and be done with it. That's what I'm going to do.
Right. Let's get another company rolling here. And then so when you're, I don't know, I guess there's probably a lot of components to the software, but when you are using it, are you like looking at an image of the house or, the commercial property and stuff like that to kind of program this stuff, or what does it sort of look like, I guess?
Yeah, so I would say depends on who's doing the programming or sequencing. A lot of people use the word programming, which is misleading because nobody's doing any code writing. It's
right.
I think sequencing is a better term. We're sort of massaging the sound and lights to dance together. And different sequencers, meaning the people who are doing the sequencing, I think have a different approach. But from a software perspective, another thing that makes X-Lights kind of fantastic, if you choose to go this way, is that there's actually a three-dimensional modeling approach. So you can actually build a three-dimensional rendering of a building or a house or a tree or whatever you're doing, so that when you apply the lighting to this visualization, you can see it as you're doing the sequencing, and it's rather accurate, which is a lot different than when I first started doing this, where we use visualization tools that looked like I don't know, sort of an Etch-a-Sketch or a Light Bright. It was not the same. But because I come from that world where we didn't have 3D modeling and visualization, or even 2D photographic based visualization, which I think is what most people use probably still, is a two-dimensional photograph that we basically lay the lighting onto in a visualization tool, and then when the programming plays back, it'll play the music and you can see the lights dancing, on your building or whatever.
Right.
But I come from a world where I don't need that. I can visualize things in my head. When I do a visualization, all I'm doing is throwing dots on there to make sure that things are blinking the way they're supposed to be blinking. But I don't really very often use a true visualization because I don't need to. But that's because I come from a world of Etch-a-Sketches and Light Brights. So
right, yeah. Yeah, you learned on the other method. Yeah. And then just to jump back to clarify too, about when you're talking about like RGB and pixel based stuff, that's where it's similar. 'Cause I've been learning a lot about like digital billboards, and that's basically what they are, is like 3 LEDs, red, green, and blue, that can make nearly any color then, right? And you can create like an image essentially.
Yeah, that's right. In some cases. So the first part of what your statement is absolutely accurate. Red, green, blue in every bulb. We'll use that word. We call them pixels, but it's a bulb, LED based, and there are many, many, many different shapes and sizes of them. And yes, depending on the bit depth of the pixel or the bulb, 16 million colors or more, or less, depending on the bulb. But most people will use that number. And what gets interesting is where you go to the second part of your statement. So, using them like a billboard or displaying images and things like that across them. So the answer to that is really sort of, it depends. And it all depends on density. So a good example might be a project we worked on last week where we have some walk-through tunnels. People are walking through these tunnels, and there are some rather large pixels, they're big balls, that kind of go up and over this archway, and they're 5 feet apart, which is pretty far apart. So we're not going to be running any pictures of snowflakes across that. It's just cool patterns and color changing and things like that. And on the same project, there's a Christmas tree that has something like, I think, 40 or 50,000 pixels on it, and they're dense enough that we can run video clips of snowflakes and large objects and things around this tree. So it's about density. And there's another phenomenon that's happened, especially in the residential side of light shows, around this density issue. It's not an issue. That's not the right word, but around the density equation, let's say, is like, I don't know when the trend started, but probably a couple of years ago, maybe more. People started using RGB pixels to build what we call a matrix, which is just a big square or rectangle with a bunch of these things in it that look like a billboard, like you're saying. And when I first saw somebody do that, they were probably on 3 or 4 inch spaced apart. So you're still not showing movies on it, but it's doing cool patterns and things. But the first thing I thought of, like, why would you do that? It looks like a television. And over the years now, people have started doing them tighter and tighter and tighter to where they're on like 1 inch spacing, and even now there's folks in home displays using the same kind of really tightly spaced panels that you see on like a jumbotron at a football game or something. The same exact panels. So it is a television. And I'm like, it's cheaper to get the Sony down at Best Buy and stick it in the window than it is to build that thing.
Yeah, really.
And then also why? I don't understand exactly. And so we have clients who will ask, because they see these. Our clients will see this stuff on YouTube or whatever. And even this one we were working on yesterday, the one I mentioned was on a football field. So the client was like, "Hey, we want to put a big grid up here between the goalposts," and I just said no. Like, I'm not doing that. Like, why? Yeah. Because that's ridiculous. Just hang a TV up there. Why? I don't understand why you would do that. You can do something cooler than that. So anyway, I just said no. We're not putting anything in that goalpost.
Right.
So now there's
You're
nothing.
The expert. Yeah.
I think that's more about opinion than it is any expert opinion, right? That's just sort of like Darren doesn't want to hang televisions everywhere.
And then are you guys doing anything with like augmented reality projection kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And so there are a couple of things there. Like, I've been trying to get things in the direction, especially on the projection side, for years. And it's a little bit of a hard market to break into, because there are people in the audiovisual space and the sort of event production space that have been doing that for a while. And so that's usually who people go to first. So we've done one project that was a projection mapping on a casino, and it was several years ago now, so when it was really expensive to do. So we were stoked to get the project, but that was the only one we've actually done at that level. But then the augmented reality side of things is actually more interesting, because that's more applicable to our clients and to what we're doing for them. And really, this past year, I mentioned earlier a French company that we work with their representatives here in the States on. So the company here is called Artistic Holiday Designs, and they're based out of Chicago. They rep a company called LeBlanc Illumination out of France. And so they came up with this idea of using augmented reality to, first they started using it for their trade show, just internally. Like, so they would have people come into their booth and stick some VR headsets on, and be able to walk through some of their decor in a virtual environment. And it was really cool. Like, no, I had never seen anybody do that before. Well, then they took the idea and moved it into an augmented reality type of an application on the client side. And so we started talking. We haven't implemented it this year because I ran out of time, but I know that they're offering that their technology behind augmented reality, and the ideas are fantastic. They're sort of, the idea is you build an app that's venue specific for a client, and depending on the target, maybe you've got an adult target audience, you've got a teen target audience, you've got a young kid target audience, and you can create any number of sort of games that are augmented, using your phone in an augmented space. Or you can set up, for example, this is simple but it's a great marketing ploy, is if you have a piece of decor that is popular for people to do photo ops in front of, which is always what we try to have, you don't have to put let me see how I'm going to say this, reverse it. So if somebody stands in front of this particular piece and they use their phone and they use that app to take a photo of their kids or whatever, it, you know, automatically, like got a theme park, it'll put the logo and, you know, different things around that photo. So it's little things like that where we're trying to give our clients, you know, more branding capabilities, but also give their visitors some more interactive type of things to do. And that's where I think augmented reality is actually going to, I think we'll see more of it this year. We're definitely going to do some of that this year coming up and going forward. It's a perfect environment for it, especially like games with kids, you know, go find this reindeer or do this thing or do that thing, and do it in an interactive fashion using an app is going to happen more and more. So yeah, it's happening. So,
it's cool stuff. Yeah, it's exciting.
Yep, it is.
And then a question I had, you kind of alluded to it, but like let's say for the zoo that you just did, for example, display, is that kind of like a build it once and then they can put it back up every year, or how does that work?
Yeah, so there's a few components, right? So you've got like the light show components, you've got general lighting, which is, you know, light strings and bulbs wrapped around trees and buildings, and then you'll have display pieces or props, which, so for example, in the zoo environment, we have a giant 3D lit up elephant that's real size, you know, and things like that. We've got giraffes and elephants and all kinds of things out there. So it depends on the piece. In theory, all of it is reusable, and, you know, it all comes down. Actually, in their environment, it doesn't all come down. They leave a lot of tree wrapping and things like that up all year. But just for sake of conversation, usually they all come down, you know, January timeframe, and then for them it's July, and they start putting it all back up. But the reality is that's a great theory. You know, everything, you know, is going to last forever, but it doesn't. You know, especially in an environment like that, which is like a park-like environment. So they've got all kinds of critters eating wire all day long. So the reality is, I would say between 10 and 40%, depending on the weather and how hungry the squirrels were, you know, of the product is either lost or damaged any given year. That would be in an environment like that. That would be high for other environments. You know, we have indoor environments that, you know, those products generally, unless there's some freak of nature or a weird power problem, they do last almost forever. So it sort of depends on the environment, but in theory, yes, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, reused.
Yeah.
Most of our clients will add new things every year, you know, or change things out, so keeps things fresh and new and shiny.
And then, so are you generally involved with kind of that, you know, up down situation, or are clients sort of generally able to do that themselves?
I would say that we're more generally involved than not. I try. It's interesting because it sort of goes back to what I mentioned earlier about how, you know, we could do 50 or 60 projects a year, but I don't want to do 50 or 60 projects a year. And so what I have to do is try to focus my team on what we do best and eliminate the things that anyone can do. And one of those things is, we just call it general labor, you know, installation of lighting. In our world, that's not our core competency. Not that we don't have the competency, it's just not it's not efficient for us to spend our time wrapping lights around trees. That's not really what we get paid to do. But we have clients who need us to, so we do. You know,
right.
But when I'm doing a new proposal for a new client, I always pitch this as a consultancy first, and then what tends to happen is I say, so we're going to be your designer, we're going to be your consultant, we're going to procure, I can't say that word, we're going to buy all your products for you, and we're going to make everything happen for your project, and then we're going to take your people and teach them how to install it. And they look at, then that's about when they start looking at me like, yeah, no.
Have you seen our people?
Yeah. So I try to push it that way most of the time. But what I've learned over the last, I guess, few years of doing things that way was that the projects, we either have to spend a lot of time with the client teams who are doing that installation. Otherwise, the quality drops, as you might imagine, but not to our standards. So most of the time, really what we're doing now is not a full installation with my team, but we're using my team as sort of crew leaders or on-site project managers for other teams of people. So we have
Gotcha.
my team does quality assurance, other people do the actual installation. For
Right.
for the most part, we still do full installations of more technical projects. I mentioned a big light show that we did under a highway overpass, for example. So
Yeah.
there was all sorts of weird stuff with that one that I was not going to leave up to anyone else to deal with. Um,
Uh-huh.
Trying to get an approval from the Texas Department of Transportation to drill a hole in a concrete beam on the underside of a freeway.
I can
So
imagine that was, yeah.
give that a shot. See how, see how that rolls. Yeah, and you have to account for things like you have to bring in engineers for the weirdest things sometimes. Like in that case, it was the vibration of the concrete and how it was going to affect this tracking that we were putting on the concrete. And
Yeah.
so when you're working in that environment, and that installation started over the summer. So in Texas, it's 100 degrees, but when you're in a lift with your head stuck right underneath a roadway in the middle of summer in Texas, it's about 150 degrees up there, and you suddenly start seeing things that people I don't think like generally people don't think about. Say, who thinks about the vibration on the underside of a highway when you drive over a bridge? I would say nobody except the engineer who built it. and but we did, and we brought in an engineer because there's a constant vibration, and when a big truck goes by, it's more of a thud than a vibration. So you had to have somebody to design the right approach to do an installation like that. Or wind load. We do a big project for the Atlanta Braves, and they have this. I don't know what it's called. It's sort of a canopy, but the roof of this canopy is about 100 feet in the air, and we have I think 10 big sort of matrix panels, like the televisions I was talking about earlier,
Hmm.
hanging from 100 feet up, down about 30 or 40 feet. There's 10 of them, so it's something like 300 feet by 40 feet. It's ginormous. And when
Whoa.
we went through that process and went through the engineering process, uh, there were some interesting requirements. One of them was that we had to have uh, enough open surface area, in other words, not solid surface, to allow I can't remember what the number was off the top of my head now, but a wind speed of something like 70 miles an hour or something, um,
Oh,
or it would break. But at the same
yeah.
time, it required that the cabling that we use to secure these things actually had a breaking point of pretty low, actually, something like 50 pounds or something. So they wanted these curtains basically to be able to let as much wind pass through them as possible. And at the same time, if the wind speed got too high, they wanted them to be able to break off, and float away instead of damaging the structure.
Right.
So things like that. It's like people go, it's just Christmas lights. No, it's not really just Christmas lights. There's
Yeah.
that. But again, I mentioned when we first started talking, that's the fun part to me is the things that we learn every day uh, from electricians and from engineers and all the people that we get to work with. And it's I'm 50 years old and I'm still learning really crazy new things all the time. It's almost maybe it's part of why I love my job. Is sort of you can have a job where you do the same thing every single day, and you're getting paid because of what you know. Uh,
Hmm.
so in general, people like to continue learning, but you're in a role where you're probably going to only continue learning the things that are going to help you advance in that role. And where in my world, it's almost the opposite. It's I do this weird thing that I do, and it's all these other people that I get to work with who are educating me on all kinds of different stuff, everything from plumbing and electrical and wind speeds and all this engineering stuff, and I love it. And you just get all this random knowledge from really really smart people, and
Yeah.
uh, it helps make our customers' displays better and safer and all that. And it's really fun to do that. Metal guys, that's another one. Welding techniques. I never thought I'd learn so much about the differences
Hmm.
between welding aluminum and steel, but we do. So
Right.
all the
Dude,
interesting.
it sounds fun. Yeah. That's awesome. So I would imagine, myself included, that some people listening are hearing this and like kind of want to get started themselves and try this stuff out. So how would you, do you have any tips or recommendations of how someone could kind of get started on this stuff as a DIY kind of thing?
Yes, I actually have several. First is that they should check out some of the online forums in this DIY community for synchronized Christmas lighting enthusiasts, because it's a great community of people. And some, I can't even think of some of the names of them off the top of my head, but there are X Lights related forums specific to the software that we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
There are usually regional groups of Christmas decorators that host meetings locally, so you can kind of meet up type things in person,
Right.
all over the country, and some of them are rather large. But there are the online forums is where most people start. Is they poke around looking for synchronized light show forums, and there's a ton of them out there. Facebook groups, that type of thing, and everybody wants to help the new guy get started. It's a real great community. There's even there's a little conference, I guess, trade show thing called Christmas Expo, which anybody getting started should absolutely attend, and that's where probably everyone who's ever been on the Great Christmas Light Fight attends that conference,
Okay.
as well as the Trans World Christmas Show in St. Louis every year. Those are the two. I would say that the Christmas Expo event is probably better for somebody just getting started.
Mm-hmm.
Trans World is geared a little bit more towards the commercial side. But that'd be a great place to start. I'd also say, so in my world, what I've done over the years is we have this Extreme Lightscapes, my company that does the light shows, and over the years we that evolved into some direct buying from overseas, which led to the founding of the ChristmasLightEmporium.com a few years ago, which is an online retailer of more traditional Christmas lighting and some RGB things. And so it's places like that, like the ChristmasLightEmporium.com, which is founded by people who do large commercial light shows for a living and who come from a DIY background, doing home displays.
Mm-hmm.
There aren't very many suppliers, in fact, I can't think of any, who have that background in their ownership and are growing as fast. In fact, that company is the biggest part of my business is in terms of revenue and growth. And I'm pretty sure it's because most of our customers know who owns the company and know what the background is. So when
Yeah.
they usually have way more complex questions for us than your traditional guy buying Christmas lights at Target might have for the sales associate at Target.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why they buy with us, because we help them do what they need to do, and we have the knowledge to do that. So that's fun. And we focus on customer service. For all my companies, that's the number one thing is customer service. But we also focus on what I call keeping it real, which is if a customer's not being cool, I fire them. That's I don't. I think every relationship in business is a two-way street, and
Yep.
if you don't have a two-way street, then someone is going to lose, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't want any part of those kinds of relationships. So it's a thing where I always kind of require a two-way street, and it's the same way we treat our customers at the Christmas Light Emporium. It's like for example, we get questions every day. In fact, this morning there was a few people that they just ask if we have any discounts happening or whatever, and we just don't. Like, we basically don't discount anything. And I'm not trying to be whatever, a jerk about that or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
we just don't. And and I always explain, this is a two-way street. I can give you a huge discount on every order you make and then not be here for you when you need me 2 years from now. Or we can all just settle on a two-way street and everybody's happy. And you get a
Yeah.
great product we have a 1-year return policy. Nobody does that, right? So it's sort of like you have to have this partnership that gives the customer something above and beyond, and then also ask them to give a little something, which is that you can go buy from the cheapest supplier with no warranty and no return policy and all of that stuff if you want to. But I
Mm-hmm.
prefer that you take our fair pricing and all of our great benefits and our very high customer service rating and stay with us in a partnership. that's how I do Extreme Lightscapes. That's how I do the Christmas Light Emporium and Lumen Immersive Media too. Same approach. Seems to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, dude, that's awesome that you have the freedom to do that, and you can do that because it's your own, your own companies and everything, and you can run them like you want to. So that's awesome.
Yep. If anybody wants to know any more about my philosophy, or even yourself, in terms of our conversation, there's an About Us page at thechristmaslightemporium.com, which is a very sort of personal write-up that I did one day when I was trying to figure out how I got here, why I've gotten everything I want in life, and why do I deserve this? What am I doing right? Because I think that's a hard thing for people to think about. It's like, pat yourself on the back. It's what it feels like. It feels like you're trying to pat yourself on the back, which generally in our culture is not, it's not looked upon with a smile. It's like, well, stop patting, unless you deserve it, right? but you sit there and I'm like, no, I gotta think through this, like in a real sort of heartfelt, thoughtful way. Like what got me here?
Mm-hmm.
And I just started writing, and about an hour or an hour and a half later, I think the truth was on paper, and I'm like, this is it right here. And it has a lot to do with my mother and how I was raised, and one thing leading to another, and why we do what we do. And in summary, I guess you could say that I call it hope. That's it. Like, we help people bring more hope into the world. And there's a whole lineage about why I think that way up there on that website, if anybody cared to take a look at it. So,
dude, that's awesome. Man, Darren, I love it. Thanks for sharing all this stuff. I spent some time on the Christmas Light Emporium, and just like, dude, you can easily get sucked in with all that stuff. It's so fun to look at that stuff and just kind of explore around there. So I will have links to all your websites for people listening to check all that stuff out and explore on this stuff. And yeah, man, I'll let you get back to work, and appreciate your time coming on here.
Thanks much. Thanks for having me, man.
Mm-hmm. All right, cool.